Hi, everyone. Welcome back to being the best version of yourself. I'm your host, Dr. Carrie Heller. Today, we have a special guest, Megan. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell our listeners about yourself?
Absolutely. So, my name is Megan Gall. I'm here in Staten Island, New York, over on the East Coast, and I really have been trying to get. I guess I've been joining podcasts over the past few years just to get out some something that's close to my heart, which is focusing on healing emotional eating and coming to a calmer relationship with food, especially when it kind of connects with weight loss and weight management. My personal history with that is that I've lost 100 pounds in 2018, and I've been maintaining a healthy weight range since then. So that's kind of the big challenge that a lot of people haven't cracked yet, the maintaining of the weight loss. And that's why I really began my coaching. So that's a little about me.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. We're definitely happy to have you here and excited to kind of dive right in. I would say probably one of the big questions maybe to start with is, especially, for people that have a hard time with, time management, organization, executive function skills, what are kind of your go-to recommendations to start to help people to kind of, if they want to start to make some changes around sort of their eating habits, but have a hard time kind of setting up stuff or sticking with stuff. Like, what would be a kind of a couple of good ways to maybe get for someone to kind of get started?
I like this question. And it kind of depends on where you're starting at. But I can share a little bit about my personal history with this because if you were to kind of look in my window in 2018, you'd see a person who had almost no executive function whatsoever, very little. It was all going to work, and I had none left in my personal life. I don't know if you've experienced that or your listeners have experienced that, but it is it is I feel like it's a common state now where a lot of us give all our energy to the things that feel super necessary and the things that other people are looking in on us about. So for me, it was work. And when I got home, anything to do with taking care of myself felt like completely out of my wheelhouse. I didn't feel able to do anything like cooking or even getting good sleep. I didn't feel the ability to do any of those things. So, how I started, I really had to start with like acknowledging that what I was not working on was actually negatively impacting me. And that sounds simpler than it actually is. But for me, it involved getting an outside opinion. And in my case, it was a cognitive behavioral therapist who who kind of drew my attention to the ways where I could do a ton at work, do a ton of tasks, and then I didn't have that same drive for myself. So first, I would say get some outside opinions if you're not always feeling in touch with the way that those tasks like cooking yourselves a healthy meal can like is really important to you. So get someone's outside opinion first. And that kind of helped me wrap my brain around how I was kind of, I guess, harming myself by relying on the easiest ways to get myself fed. I'm thinking of Chinese takeout, snacks from the snack aisle, the Pringles, the Hot Pockets, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was what I was very deep into. McDonald's, I live in New York City, so bagels every day for breakfast. Nothing wrong with any of those things in isolation, but I had to come to terms with the very real ways that not bringing myself real meals was impacting my health. In my case, I got to 235 pounds and I had no energy whatsoever. So it was like a bit of a vicious cycle there.
All right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And so it sounds like a lot of it is, this acknowledgement of that, that there's an issue or there's a benefit of making improvements. And so, because if you don't know where you're trying to achieve, it's hard to sort of achieve it. So that first step is figuring out but also to make it a priority to decide, this is important enough to me that I'm not just going to eat whatever is around and easiest, but I need to prioritize my health. And so I'm going to make these changes. And so it seems like the next step then, I guess, is to figure out what changes you actually should make and then how to sort of sustain those because as you said sort of with maintaining the weight that often is from what I know a lot of times is often the hard but what do you think stops people from maintaining weight loss over time generally?
Well, you mean like for folks who have already lost a significant amount
Yeah.
of weight in it. So I think a big part of folks regaining weight is that they're not prompted to think about how the actions they're doing to lose the weight have to continue after they reach the goal weight. So, and a very like poignant example of this is folks who kind of cut carbs to to lose weight quickly. That's just one example of a high effort action and habit. And when they reach the end of their weight loss goal, if they did not initially intend to cut out carbs for the next few decades, then them going back to their previous way of eating is going to eventually have their body weight resettle back where it was
Yeah.
when they were doing that activity. All like our weight loss really stems from our actions long term. So for me personally, it wasn't cutting carbs, but it was this question of should I stop having dessert or stop having the kind of processed snacks in that I love, right? Reese's peanut butter cups, Cheetos, and Pringles, Chinese food, all that. So I was faced with the question at the beginning of like, am I going to do this weight loss with those things or without those things? And I thought to myself, in 20 years, in 30 years, am I going to want to be constantly staying vigilant and not having any of these processed snacks? Or am I going to want to have a nice relationship with them and have them on occasion? And my answer was the second one. I really wanted to still have them in my life and not feel crazy around them. So that was an example of me kind of imagining my post weight loss self and what I would want to keep up with. And I think with people who cut carbs or go keto, often they don't think of their post weight loss self and what they're going to want to keep giving up. So all the pizza at every kid's birthday party or the cake at everyone's I don't know when you have cake, a birthday party. So thinking about your post weight loss self while you're losing weight is a really key step to keeping the weight off. There's a lot, but I think that's a top one.
Hmm. Right. So it sounds like what you're getting at is this idea of making whatever you're doing to lose the weight something that's sustainable long term and can become part of like a natural routine, not just I'm gonna do this temporarily and then go back to the way it was before, because then you're not gonna keep the weight off.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly like you intend to do it all your life. So, for example, I started walks in like 4 months into weight loss. I started doing some kind of activity. And right now I look at that and I'm not doing regular walks, but I am doing regular movement at the gym. So it doesn't have to take exactly the same form, but I think if you intend to make a change in your exercise or in a particular area of food, you don't have to keep it exactly the same, but you have to keep the spirit and the actions consistent towards that area that you changed.
Right. So this idea, like if you stop focusing on it, then
Right.
you're probably more likely to kind of lose track of it. I mean, same thing with, if you're trying to be better organized and get stuff done, if, you put all the stuff in your task list for the first week or two, and then you kind of gradually stop putting stuff in or stop putting stuff in a calendar, you're probably going to eventually resort back to how you were doing stuff before.
Oh, yeah. And I have, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, but kind of the shiny object syndrome where there's something new that you really want to work on, and then everything else in your life kind of falls away. So, what people who maintain their weight have had to do is they've had to find ways to really systematize the few actions that are most important for keeping them at their weight long term. And usually, systematizing is having a similar rotation of meals, always keeping a certain time for preparing meals, and always keeping a certain time for movement. The nitty
Hmm.
gritty details don't matter, but if you have this shiny object syndrome where you're always getting hyper focused on something new, there's kind of a foundation that has to stay the same with your health habits so that those other goals that you have don't overshadow the baseline healthy actions that you do.
Right. No, I mean, that definitely makes sense. I mean, I guess from like a nutritional standpoint or in general is, if someone has sort of, done a certain like, develop change their eating habits, things like that, though, does the body react in a way where, because I would imagine like when it's new, on some level, I would imagine it's possible to maybe lose more weight possibly because it's something new. But if you're doing the same thing after a while, is your body going to like, do you have to adjust what you're doing over time to some degree also?
So it does depend if you we're talking specifically about fat loss over time. Let's say you're not tracking calories. So you're not exactly looking closely at your calorie deficit, but you've made a habit change that lowers your overall calorie average. So maybe you drink soda half the time or you switch to diet soda. Once you make that change, your calorie average is now at a new level long term. So your body weight is going to follow. You're going to lose a certain amount of fat until what you're normally eating matches what your body needs to maintain its weight. So, yes, you make one change, your body weight changes to a certain point, and then it's probably going to stop and it's going to adapt to whatever you're doing now. So, usually, folks who have lost a large amount of weight find that they've got to make multiple changes and in kind of in a staircase way, like they keep the last one and then they add a new one to reach that newer, lower threshold of weight. It doesn't, scientifically, there's also muscle gain that happens if you're exercising and doing progressive overload, so that can complicate it. But yes, to answer your question, normally you make some changes that helps you reach a new threshold of your average body weight. And then if you want to, you can make another change to reach that, if you want to keep going towards your goal.
No, I appreciate you explaining that. It is helpful to think because I guess it really gets to this idea that even though you have these habits you develop and have to maintain, there's still an element of sort of making these adjustments as you go, and so you have to be able to kind of hold what you're currently doing, but then continue to have the flexibility to modify it to some degree, also.
Totally. And I was someone who I love sweets, as I mentioned. I love snacks. I love processed stuff. So to keep that stuff in my diet while I was making these changes required me to get a little more nitty gritty with the calories.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who loves that stuff and you want to keep it in, you can fit it in even while you're making these other healthy changes. But if you overdo them, if you're not like really conscious of how many calories you're spending on those things, they can hold you back if you're not kind of managing your calories at other places. So it's good to, if you're numbers focused and you love that kind of stuff like me, then it's great to it's great to dive into that and really learn what calorie level your body needs to maintain its current weight.
Right, and it sounds like also setting up a system that you're comfortable with that you can follow through on in terms of tracking to however specific you want to track. Seems like also an important thing to help with the accountability.
But yeah, and I will promote food journaling to, the high heavens until the end because I think for me it helped me because I have, and as we talked about shiny object syndrome, anytime I was working on something new, I still had this baseline habit of bringing mindfulness in some way to my eating habits. So no matter what happened that day, what crazy thing was happening at work or what my social relationships, what blew up, no matter what was happening, I still had this daily habit of mindfully putting down my food somewhere, recording my choices somewhere. And I've worked with clients who've done this in all different ways. So for me, I love numbers. So I used a calorie tracking app. For other clients, they love journaling. So they'll do a paper pencil style journal where they plan their meals and then they mark off how they did. For some people, they love taking pictures. All of those things they have the same effect, which is bringing your healthy choices to a front burner in your life every day rather than having it totally fall off the stove, so to say.
Yeah. And then going back to something you had mentioned a few minutes ago around the importance of movement, I think that's definitely an area to really think about. Because I think, if you have someone who has a very demanding job, it can, depending on your job, it can be very easy to sit at a desk all day. And I think there are also a lot of ways that people can get a lot of movement in. And, this is something I definitely focus on a lot with my job in terms of working with people on this. And so, a couple of things I found helpful along those lines are, using like a desk elliptical. So you kind of pedal while you're working, a sit stand desk, walking pad, you kind of, walk on a treadmill while you're working or using a balance board like the whirly board. So I think, but the idea also of like finding a variety of different things that work for you to sort of it's still there's definitely benefits and importance of taking a break from actual working too. But the idea is, well, basically, if you're at a desk, doesn't necessarily mean you truly have to be still.
Yeah, oh, that's true. So I've had clients who love the walking pad, right, to take calls on while they're on the walking pad. I've even had a client who used the under the desk pedaler. Like it's almost like a little mini stationary bike just for your feet. I think that's awesome. And I've heard a lot of personal trainers I've talked with love the concept of movement snacks instead of feeling like you have to devote an entire hour every single day to intense exercise. It can be really effective, especially if your goal is fat loss over time. It can be really effective to add 2 minutes of extra movement in spurts throughout the day. You're increasing your overall total daily energy expenditure. And often that has an even bigger impact than an intense 30-minute workout,
Yeah.
depending on how you do it. So don't ever get into the trap of thinking just a little bit of going up and down the stairs a few times is a waste. Because if you enjoy that kind of thing, if you enjoy fitting it in, doing squats while you're brushing your teeth, it can really have an impact on your overall burn for the day.
Right. So it's good to sort of think about that sometimes these little movements add up to a lot over time. And the
Yeah,
idea of, looking at what works for you. I mean, so, certainly the desk bike or the elliptical can work very well. And I have one of those and really enjoy it a lot. Um,
I love it.
so it's great. I just, and it's, because the thing is also, this stuff's mindless. That basically
Mhm.
the idea is for a lot of these things, you can sort of, whether it's, pedaling elliptical or using the walking pad. And again, like, depending on your job and, meetings and things like that, there's certain things you probably can do easily during certain kinds of work, like respond to email and other things that, you maybe need to be sitting and it's harder to sort of do. But again, you have to figure out for your individual job, in terms of your list, like what make, or a yoga ball chair, but or, but rotate throughout the day. But to think about if you have, even if you have all the stuff, if you're not using them as much as you would like, to take a step back and really think about how can I structure my day to use this? Because I definitely work with a lot of people where it's they actually have a lot of these tools, but they just sit and they hardly use them. So I think thinking about how to actually weave that in, like whether it's, I don't know, whenever you're responding to emails, you use the walking pad. And then when you have, I don't know, Zoom meetings, you pedal on the elliptical. But to have like sort of a set kind of plan for different sort of types of movement can also help too.
I love that. You're almost like habit stacking in a way. You're like fitting together an action you already do in your routine, you can't get away from, with the new activity that you want to build even further. I think that's
Right. Well, because think about, I mean, if you're someone that has a very long work day, think about how many hours you might be at a desk for based on your job. And if you could be getting movement in for a good part of that, imagine how many hours a day of movement you can get.
absolutely. And for some people, it can be a form of stimulation that kind of helps you think better in a way. I
Right.
know.
Well, yeah, and certainly for people with ADHD that have a hard time like with sitting still, you can harness the fidget because I specialize in ADHD, and so basically you can harness the fidgeting to in turn potentially improve focus, and so it actually can help you to focus better. Besides the fact it's healthy to get not be sitting for as long and get movement in.
Yeah, that's right. So if you ever feel guilty for not having a regular exercise time in your day, but you're a fidgeter, you're already doing a lot for your overall activity levels.
Right. If you take that a step further and do sort of a mindless actual, sort of exercise activity from it, then you're getting even more benefit out of it. And it's also important to think outside the box. There's lots of different ways to sort of get movement in. And so whether it's, pedaling, even using like a wobble stool, would sort of figure out what works for you. And again, you may try something it may work well, you may try something that doesn't work well. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, using the Stairmaster did not work quite as well sitting as I'd hoped it would. But I like the bike and the elliptical version quite well. And for standing, the Stairmaster one works well, just not for sitting.
No, I wouldn't imagine. I feel like that'd be a rough one.
Yeah, I figured I'd give it a try and just see. I'm always curious to sort of see what else is out there. But
That's great.
again, it's good to try. And the whirly board's a lot of fun because that. Have you seen? Do you know what a whirly board is?
Is that one where you have to balance?
Yeah, here, I'll show you.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, you also see the wobble still behind.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. Love.
So this is the whirly board, the wide board version. So they make, I think, an original one. The wide board. The wide board one is really meant more for like standing for longer periods of time on it. So basically, you put it on the ground and you can kind of balance on it. And then they actually came out with a new one recently called the Whirly Complete. I think it's called the Whirly Complete, I believe. And so basically, it's the same idea, but basically the bottom pops up. So you can basically have it on a little cushion. You can have like where you don't have to balance quite as much on it, or have like you put a cover on. It's pretty much like the other board, uh, like the original wide board.
That's
So it's great because it's basically you have to balance, but you can control, and there's a little ring too. So basically, if you want to balance some, but you don't, even if you could balance, like I can balance on it very well, but I don't really want to. I mean, I don't want to balance on it probably for an hour at a time necessarily. Sometimes I'll put the ring underneath it, and then this way I can stand on it, but I don't have to balance quite as much. So the idea behind those is they're fun to use. That it's you can you almost have to move a little bit to hold yourself still, but you get moving in. It's good. It's a good core workout and. When it's fun, and kind of breaks up the day a little bit too.
that's great. And I can envision because for me, sometimes out of sight, out of mind, and I forget I have it. So if I have all these gadgets that I know are helpful, but then I put them away and then I forget they're there, it would be helpful for me to have like a little list of like options, movement snacks for the day, right? Like, okay, I could do the wobble board. I could take that out. I could get the wobble stool. I could get this. Very helpful to have something prominently displayed. It has those list of actions, and that kind of helps you for not getting bored too. One thing like
Right, and yeah, and you could have a sticky note on your computer screen with them. And in general, I think having them out to the extent, it's not going to magically make you use them, but I think if they're physically in front of you, you're more likely to see them as opposed to if you have them in a closet somewhere and you have to go pull them out to use them, you're probably far less likely to use them.
oh, yeah. Another movement snack that I really recommend, but I used it myself to get started, and a couple clients have really loved it. If you're a commuter, if you drive anywhere, or even take the train to your work, then you can park further away or get off one stop early or one stop late. So, this really helps if you have this, and a few of my clients have had this kind of a block about starting exercise and movement. I think that's common for folks who have maybe past trauma, maybe difficulty in being calm in their body or like feeling their body. And so there's a lot of resistance to moving their body. That was me when I first started. So if anyone, I think it's sometimes related to anxiety and trauma. But if that's someone out there who's feeling like, I don't even want to do the snacks, try adding it in a way that is, it almost is not even considered exercise. It's just what you normally do, just a few blocks further from
Right,
what
just a
you were
nice
doing.
way to kinda get some extra movement in without necessarily doing anything that different.
Exactly, yeah. You
'Cause
don't even find time
another
in
thing that I see quite a bit is this idea of, when people sort of are busy with, work, household stuff, the idea they feel like, I can't really make the time to work out. It's hard to find the time.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, when you can get physical movement in while you're working, then you're not losing time working. Or even, thinking about it from a perspective of, if you're using the elliptical or, or an exercise bike, you can respond to emails or, clear your to-do list. While it is good certainly to have that mental break from work and task related things, if you feel like you really can't devote the time truly to sort of disconnecting, there are certain kinds of workouts, unrelated to being at a desk that you could actually do while still kind of getting something done.
Oh, it's great. You're basically using 1 hour for 2 different activities that can be done simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, one that I do, for example, is when I do elliptical in the morning, oftentimes I'll basically take a few minutes and go through my to do list for the day and preview my calendar. So this way, if I need to like replan stuff or look at it, it basically allows me to then hit the ground running after I already have everything squared away, as opposed to having to take that time separately to do it. And so it serves as a nice warm up, while I'm warming up my elliptical in the morning.
Oh, that's great. Warming up your brain and your body.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think the morning routine is also another important thing. I mean, so are the evening routines and others, but the idea of thinking about the idea of a routine, because that can often help with thinking about, I would imagine hydration certainly is quite important as well.
Oh, yeah. Now, I don't know if you this would resonate with your folks, but I know for me, I felt very resistant to any routine at all, especially at the very beginning, because I guess I was in this place where because I was giving so much of my mental energy to work, I was resentful of anything that demanded anything on my time after work or before work. It was to structure these activities before work and after work, there was a lot of resistance there. It brought up a lot of executive dysfunction because it felt like uh, demand avoidance, that I was trying to avoid the demand. But I did find that only adding one thing or only focusing on one thing at a time and making it the thing that I felt was easiest was very helpful. So you and I are talking a lot about movement snacks and changing how you're food journaling and adding grocery shopping to the list of tasks for the week. So it can feel overwhelming very quickly. Picking one thing to work on only is I would recommend that above all else, like not adding 2 things to your improvements list, at a time.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good advice, and then I think the idea is to start small and basically because if you try to do too much at once, you're really probably not going to do anything.
Yeah,
So the idea of just starting with pick one thing and kind of build from there can often help towards developing better kind of long term. Uh,
yeah, and you over
that's
time, you'll get a routine that actually feels like something you're used to doing, and it's easier for you because you've broken yourself into it a little bit. You've come to do it like, you take one action, like, maybe that's, drinking a glass of water when you wake up. If you've done it for 3 weeks and you've kind of really kind of matched it into your routine in exactly the right spot, you do it right after you wake up, right before you pick up your phone, all that
yeah.
stuff. If you've spent 3 weeks practicing that, it's gonna feel so much simpler to pick another thing and add it on than if you were to add drinking that glass of water, doing 15 minutes of strength training, and cooking your lunch, or packing your lunch before you go to work. All that stuff all at once is gonna be a big challenge, so keep it simple, only one thing at a time.
And I think when you're trying to plan out these things, one way of approaching it, like let's say the morning routine that I find helpful to work with people on, is the idea basically of, make a list of everything you need to do from the time you get up until you leave for work or start working. And look at how long each thing should take, and so you estimate the completion time and list it next to it. Because then what you see is if the amount of things you're supposed to be doing is actually longer than the time actually available, clearly the plan's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can basically figure out what could you do at night to compensate? What could you look at doing more efficiently? And sometimes even adjusting the order of things can make a difference, in terms of how many steps you have to take to get back and forth to do different things, or if you keep getting pulled in multiple directions when you're trying to get ready. being
Yeah.
able to sort of navigate that piece of it too can be good. So I think, with kids, that can also impact things a lot, if you're being pulled a million different directions at once. So like all these different things, if you take that time to take a step back, not to heat the moment of trying to get stuff done, but in general, it allows you to then think through how can I do this more effectively?
Yeah, and I think another piece of that is seeing if there's anything on the list that actually isn't necessary. Sometimes that's the case, especially if you're someone who likes to do everything for everyone else, if you're like a natural caretaker. A lot of women fall into this category. Sometimes there's things on that list that you make that can't be done the night before and that actually can be done by someone else in your household. And it would just take a little bit of bravery in asking for that help. So that's another piece that I want to bring up. I want to make sure that, people feel empowered to take things off their plate. Or even like, I'll give you an example. Cleaning the house. There is a spectrum of cleanliness to dirtiness that there's many places you can fall on that spectrum with what you prefer in your house. And I think a lot of people who have perfectionist tendencies tend to be really on that top level of I need to do this kind of cleaning every day and this kind of cleaning every week. But really, it's one of those things that we think of as a must, but actually there's a spectrum and we can actually decrease that without a big impact to our lives. So maybe that means, I don't know, clearing out all the shoes and putting them back where they belong. Maybe that means doing that less often. Being okay with a little bit of mess, I think, can also open up a few new places where you could take things off of your list.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point and figuring out, how to sort of mix between tolerating it being a little messier versus also looking at can you sort of address the bigger issue rather than just trying to problem solve each day. Like, so for example, if there's all these shoes that keep getting messed up, if people aren't wearing half these shoes anyway, to get them out of the common area.
Oh yeah, 100%. So yeah, there's often you have more control over what skills you wanna build and what habits you wanna do than we really think we do. So it's nice to exercise some of that control and make things easier for ourselves because we only have so much brain space and willpower.
Right. And it's the idea that basically, if you sort of keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're probably not going to get a change that you want. But if you really take that time to figure out what's important to me, what do I want to change, and then to really identify concrete steps to do that, that can be a really good starting point. And so I hope, for all listeners today that, from this, if there are things around the things we've talked about that you want to make a change with, to really think about, what's one takeaway from today that you could use to be able to sort of start making the changes that you want.
Yeah. And I also want to bring up, I guess, similar to what we were just talking about, is that the goal of weight loss, often we pack a lot of things that must do's into that goal that don't really have to do directly with fat loss over time, healthy fat loss over time. So if you need help kind of understanding what are the most important habits and what are those superfluous habits that actually we think is important for weight loss, but actually has no direct impact on weight loss, that can really help you simplify your whole process and make it much easier for you to accomplish what you're trying to do. So, for example, with movement, you don't actually have to add a ton of extra movement. If you're focusing on your food, you can have a bigger impact on your fat loss over time than you would if you focus completely on movement. So, if you heard me, I actually didn't work on movement for 4 months into my weight loss. I did a lot of progress in that time just focusing on the food. So there's just one example of how often it's simpler than we think it is. And there's a lot of superfluous tasks that we can kind of put off or not even focus on and still reach our goal.
Definitely good advice, and seems like probably a good sort of piece of advice to kind of conclude on.
I love that.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
So I'm very active on Instagram. I have a lot of sharing about my personal journey, things that have helped my clients, and how to get free help and resources. So that's on Instagram. My handle is partake_foodie. And you can also see my link in bio there, which has a lot of information about my one service, which is a one-on-one tailored weight loss coaching program. So go ahead and, connect with me there if you want to hear more about my approach or share a little bit more about what's been getting in your way.
Very great. And I'll make sure that gets into the show notes so everyone can
Thank
can
you.
find it off a link from this as well. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. This was definitely a great conversation. Hope it's helpful to all of you out there listening.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was awesome.